So we continue here on a Monday with Now Mississippi Outdoors Radio, as always brought to you by the Foundation for Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks here on Super Talk Mississippi. And as always, we welcome Adam Butler, wildlife biologist with the department, here with us today. Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say. Merry
Good
Christmas,
afternoon, JT.
all that good stuff.
Glad to be here, as always.
Major Chris Reed's up in here.
Hello.
He's armed and ready.
I'm so privileged to be here.
Law enforcement here with us. And
Yes.
back from the MSU Deer Lab, Dr. Steve Demarais joins us. It's a pleasure to have you, Steve.
Thank you, JT. Happy to be here.
Always enjoy having you here. We're going to talk more about the science of buck movement, and we'll do that coming up. But first, we got some house cleaning we need to do, so I'm going to start with you, Major Reed. Stuff in the truck, what's that all about?
Yeah, so this is our little Christmassy event that we do. Officers and as well as staff from the Department of Wildlife go out and collect toys around the metro area. We actually utilize some local Walmart locations and set up there in the parking lots. And this Saturday coming up, we'll be at the Flowood Walmart for about 5-6 hours during the day Saturday, taking up donations. And the 17th of December, I believe, is we will take all the toys that we donate, and we donate it to Blair Batson, to the kids there, to the Child Life Center. And so what that division of the hospital does is tries to, when you go there, you take a kid there, they get a toy. Santa Claus visits them in the room this time of year, and some of the kids, they have to stay there during the holidays. And so this is about the 5th year now we've been doing this, and so it's always fun to kind of go and do something a little outside our normal, I guess, duties, you would say. But it's good to go and see the kids. They get lit up on Christmas, and we bring Santa Claus with us, and he gets to visit with the kids, and so that's a fun time. And so that's what that's all about. People can, if they want to, in this area this weekend, they can drop by the Walmart in Flowood and go in, get something, and drop it off.
We certainly hope people will do that, too.
Yeah, we generally have a great turnout. People are, this time of year, the people of the state of Mississippi are so giving, and so we're thankful for that and appreciative of the opportunity to give back.
All right. What else you got on the agenda here, Adam? I think a youth squirrel hunt's underway.
Yeah, well, we're taking applications, and that's something we've been doing for, I don't know, probably 6 or 8 years now, trying to introduce new hunters to hunting via some small game opportunities. So we're taking applications now for our youth squirrel hunt we're going to have on February the 1st. And that'll be one big day, 7 locations throughout the state, different wildlife management areas, public land. And it's really an event geared toward children who don't necessarily have a hunter in the family, someone to teach them. So maybe they have an interest in hunting but don't have a dad or uncle or grandfather who hunts that can teach them. So this event's kind of geared towards that, to get them outdoors. The morning session will kind of be a little bit about hunting safety and why we hunt, and where your hunting license dollars go to fund conservation and all that sort of thing. And then in the afternoon they'll get out and do a squirrel hunt with some dog handlers. So if you're interested, or you have a kid who has an interest in hunting but may not have someone who has that expertise in the family to take them, check this out. It's a great opportunity. Like I said, 6 or 8 years we've been doing this, and usually have really big turnout. And some of the events, they really actually put a lot of squirrels in the bag. Usually they'll have a wild game cooking at the end of the day with it too.
That sounds good.
Yeah, kind of get a taste for the wild. So there's that. We also have our waterfowl draws are open right now for the 4th round of our draws on WMA. So that would be the period of January 6th to the 19th. So if you're wanting to make a hunt then during that kind of early to mid-January part of the season on one of our WMAs, sign up for those draws. Talked to our waterfowl biologist, Houston Havens, before we came over this morning. He said reports they're seeing are picking up. Looks like some ducks are starting to show up a little bit. Their latest survey, or their next survey that they will fly, will be next week. So hopefully we'll have a more formal report coming out shortly thereafter. But sounds like things are heating up in the duck blind.
Yeah, there's a little front. Hopefully, push some waterfowl down this way. Coming tomorrow is going to change. The
It'll be real
temperatures
cold,
are
middle of the
fairly different, huh?
You're going to get real cold middle of the week, looks
Yeah,
like. So.
yeah. So that's this time of year. You hope you start getting some of those fronts stacked up week after week after week, and get some pushes to restock. You know, if you get the same ducks hanging around here for a month, they get wise to the game, and they become wary. But yeah, that's good. Next week there'll be some new numbers out. Everybody kind of looks forward to that. Looks forward to kind of seeing where the ducks are, and we JT, we're also accepting applications until Thursday for a conservation officer cadet class.
Yeah.
So anybody interested or think they have what it takes, put in your application with the State Personnel Board on their website. December 12th at midnight, that application closes.
I think we've got links to that on our website and Facebook and all that too.
I believe
you
you're
don't want to go
correct.
straight to the personnel board. To search
Right, it
out
links
there.
you right there. You put all the particulars there. You got to have 64 college credit hours or 5 years of law enforcement experience. You got to have either one of those two. If not, you don't meet minimum qualifications, and unfortunately, you will not be looked at for the position. But it's there.
How many positions are they going to try to fill, Reed?
Man, I don't know, 25, 30 if we can.
Wow. Y'all down that
Hopefully.
much, huh?
Well, we're not necessarily down that much, but it's it would help us in better patrolling the state, better cover the areas. Some areas have more officers in them than others, and so that being said, if you're looking to apply for a position, we have needs all over the state, and obviously the Delta is an area that we could always need, always staff, and east part of Mississippi. I mean, it's just all over the place. So that's what we're looking for, and hopefully we can get enough applications to field a large class.
All right. What else do we have here? I know there's something going on at the Museum of Natural Science, Adam.
Yeah,
Tell me
Nicole
about that.
Smith, listeners familiar with her. She was unable to make it today, but she really hit me up about being sure to announce their Snow Much Fun event at the Museum of Natural Science. So that'll be this Friday, the 13th, and then also Saturday, the 14th. Tickets are on sale until the 12th. If you buy them pre-sale tickets are on sale till the 12th. If you buy them at the door, it'll be $10 for adults or $6 for children. And it's like so many other things at the museum. They're going to have just all kind of stuff for families and for children. They'll actually have some snowfall throughout the day in the museum. I don't know how they're going to get the weatherman to bring a little
100%
snow
chance
front
of
there,
snow
but yeah,
there.
100%
then.
chance of snow. Santa Claus may show up, but it's not just going to be that. They're also going to have some STEM experiments. So if you've got a young scientist in the family, take him or her there. Crafts, making ornaments, all kind of cool stuff. So holiday theme. Also, we'll have Hog Heaven Barbecue there, provide food on site. So
Nothing wrong with that.
If that's something that you want to do as a family, again, that's this Friday, the 13th, or Saturday, the 14th. Snow Much Fun at the Museum of Natural Science.
And then, of course, the voluntary game check. When it comes to deer, we're asking that they do that. And also remember that you need to turn in your samples as well for CWD, something that we very much is going to give you all the ability to track and to control this disease we have now here in the state of Mississippi. And both of those things are so very important.
Correct.
Make sure you do just that and as well. Also, I had a question for you, Reed. I was having this discussion with someone yesterday. In the areas that you still can feed, we were arguing that it had to be a spin cast feeder, or does it just have to be an above ground feeder?
What side of the argument were you on?
I was on the side that it was a spin cast feeder.
You were half right, and the other person was half right, because it can be an above ground feeder, covered feeder, or a stationary spin cast type feeder.
So either one, as long as it's above
you were
ground.
basically right.
And the whole notion behind that is just to keep it from being directly on the ground where it's going to be constantly wetted and moldy. And
yeah, so basically it disperses enough that the
aflatoxins
animals
and things like that.
Can eat it up before it piles up. You don't pour it on the ground. Don't pile it on the ground. That's a negative no-no every day of the week.
JT, my app keeps telling me I haven't checked out, so allow me to check into a new WMA. History shows in and out of all the locations. Who do I contact for assistance if I'm having trouble with the app?
I would. I got a little piece of that, JT, but I'm gonna, rather than try to troubleshoot it here on the radio, I would say call our biologist of the day desk at the Jackson office. That number is 601-432-2199. And they should be able to either help you or get you to someone who can fix it.
And we have Dr. Steve Demarais here with us with MSU Deer Lab. Doc, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's hunting season, and it couldn't be better.
I heard that. And now, what you bringing here? You brought some show and tell here for us.
I brought a show and tell for those on the live stream. That we've been really asking hunters to shoot harvest any buck that they see with one of our transmitting collars. We had a significant number of them malfunction. They have a drop-off mechanism here that was supposed to have dropped off last March, and a proportion of them didn't work. And so we had 12 as of the last show still carrying around collars that didn't work. And we've gotten 4 back, and I really want to thank the hunters that have gone out and harvested them for us. And they didn't shoot the collar; they shot the deer. That's really important.
And people have heard and read about the buck movements in Madison and Yazoo counties. And talk to us a little bit about the background and how that has been going. Certainly you're just basically scratching the surface of this, aren't you?
Yeah, JT, that last show we presented some preliminary results for what deer we're doing in October and November. And today I want to talk about what bucks are doing now that's coming into the rut season. And kind of rut is the breeding time of the year. And we've been having a lot of interest in this project. Our Facebook and Instagram and YouTube channel have been really getting blown up with the episodes that we've released some short videos, and really exciting to see the hunters interested in what we're learning about their big buck movements.
I actually checked it out earlier today, kind of prepping for the show, and looked over on y'all's page and saw one of those videos. It's really neat. Shows exactly where the buck was moving around.
Yeah.
I think the one that I looked at, it was the one that made 13-mile movement or something right after capture.
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
Brian Broom with the Clarion Ledger put out an article about that, and he said it's getting more traction than the Ole Miss new coaching hire.
On the deer movement with the deer. Well, what's the most you've seen them go?
Well, we have one that's up in Pickens right now, in the Pickens area. That's 30 to 35 miles from where he was captured.
Wow.
So that's an extreme case. He left and hasn't come back. Now, we have the one that was 13 miles. He's actually lived in 2 different places separated by 13 miles and has left the same time of the year each year over 2 years, moving in between his 2 home ranges. He's an extreme case.
And so, we've been asking hunters to harvest these bucks to help you recover data. Now, how many have you gotten back so far?
4 of them. So we have 8 more that we're working into the summer. So we know they have data on them, and we get 10% of the data uploaded by satellite. So we've gotten a little bit from them. But once the collar drop-off mechanism stopped working, we turned the frequency of transmission down really low, so we get 1 fix or 1 location per week now, just trying to stretch out those batteries because they're past the battery life that is expected. So we really need to get them back. If you see a collar on an orange collar on
a deer, take it.
On a buck, shoot it, please.
Take it and bring it, and please give them back the thing because they can learn so much. Now, when these things, even after the batteries expire on them, they'll still have data, correct?
They still have the data, so that's why we need them. Of course, Major Reed, we don't want them taking them at night, right?
That's correct. Yeah, the orange collar does not exempt you from statutory limitations.
No, of course not. But
JT, you'd be surprised. Somebody said, "Well, you said shoot him on the radio if you saw him."
Right. I can imagine the excuses that you get. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
So where can people learn more about this if they want to learn more about all this buck movement?
Well, our websites, we have the msudeerlab.com website that has just a whole lot of deer management and deer ecology information. And specifically our Facebook page, our Instagram, and what's that other one? Twitter. Twitter pages. MSU Deer Lab. Just type that in and you'll find our pages. And if you go just YouTube channel, MSU Deer Lab, and you can see all the videos. We've had 6 episodes that we've released on the buck movement study so far, and they're really getting some great traction.
So let's see. You talked about buck movement during the breeding season. What exactly do you mean when you say breeding season? Obviously the rut.
Yeah, the rut, and a lot of people misunderstand. They talk about the rut and the breeding season, and a buck from about October 1st until really the end of February, as long as he has hardened antlers, he's in his what I like to call the potential breeding season. But the actual breeding season takes place when the does are ready to be bred. And within any population in the state of Mississippi, that's about a 6-week period. And we talk about peak rut, and that's the time during which 70% of all the does are bred.
And probably, I don't know what the percentage of the bucks are killed because they ain't thinking.
They get stupid.
Yeah.
And that 2-week period is what I'm referring to is when I talk about peak rut. Now, if you want to know where peak rut happens or when it happens in your hunting area, there's a great PDF on the mdwfnp.com website that you can look up under the hunting tab, and then the deer hunting tab, and then down at the bottom there's a deer breeding map. And there's a huge variation across the state of about 2 months from the northwest corner down to the southeast corner. A lot of variation.
Like a cold front coming through.
Just pretty much, yes.
Yeah.
Now, are we unique in that? I mean, if you look at that map, it always strikes me how the rut can be so variable just over, if you drive 30 miles one direction, it may change the date by several weeks. Are other states like that, Dr. Demarais? Are we unique in that way?
To an extent, the southern states along the coast are similar. Alabama and Louisiana have a lot of variation. I don't know that they have quite the variation that we have, but these states, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, we have a lot of variation.
Now, I'm going to ask this question. Now, you've probably heard this one before, Doc, because at the deer camp, it's probably one of the ones that comes up around the campfire most often. But what causes the rut? When that date, that peak date, is it the same from year to year, or is it the moon phase?
Well,
or
you've
the
heard them
weather,
say before we didn't
or
have a rut this year.
Yeah.
That's a statement with not a lot of truth in it.
That's an uninformed statement.
Right.
The breeding season is controlled by normal patterns, seasonal patterns that time the doe population as to when they breed. Now, an individual doe might vary from year to year, but the population on average breeds the same time every year. Doesn't matter when the moon phase. There's some, if you read in some magazines, they talk about the harvest moon and a certain number of weeks after the harvest moon. We've researched it ad infinitum with excellent databases, and it does not vary from year to year. What a lot of hunters misinterpret is they'll go out in one year and they'll see a doe being bred by a buck, and it's outside their supposed peak breeding. Well, the point is, the peak breeding is a 2-week period when 70% of the breeding takes place. There's an early rut that's the 2 weeks before that, and 15% of the does are going to be bred during that early rut, and 15% are going to be bred in the late rut, which are 2 weeks after the peak rut. So that 6-week period, think about it in 2-week intervals. The first 2 weeks of the 6 weeks, 15%. 15 out of 100 does will get bred. The next 2-week period, 70 out of the 100 will get bred, and then the next 2 weeks after that, another 15 out of the 100 will get bred. And then sometimes a doe won't take, and she'll recycle 28 days later, and you'll see an occasional blip to the breeding activity later, much later in the season, and a fawn that is not fully mature at the normal breeding season might come into heat a little bit later too. So you'll see some secondary rut activity, but that 6-week interval, that's what is happening in everyone's deer population. When that date is varies with where you are in the state, and that's why you need to look at mdwfp.com.
No, it's true. I mean, you can talk to people that are along the river, and it's 10 days difference from 20 miles, maybe in the same county, but it's not along the river. It's outside the river. Up in the Delta area, for instance. There's some success being had in the deer woods here in the last 7 days, and it's that time of year you can mark it down. The first
Absolutely.
10 days of December in the northwest part of the state, you need to take off work.
Just the road where my county hospital is in Starkville had a 140 class buck chasing a doe across, and he got hit by a car this past weekend.
I've noticed a lot more deer along the highways here in the last 2 weeks.
Yep, no doubt about it. All right, Reed, back to you real quick. Is it legal to turn a catch dog loose on a wounded deer, and when the dog catches the deer, it is killed?
Well,
I presume they're talking about a hog dog, maybe?
yeah, the deer trailing thing with dogs is kind of has gotten big in the state, and we want people to make every effort to ethically retrieve their deer. I would suggest trying to slip up there and having a dog finish a deer off is not a legal approved method for harvesting a deer. And so if you can track that deer in there to slip up on it and maybe make a final, clean, ethical shot,
Right.
And finish it off like that would be the better option.
And would be the better option for you to make sure you don't get cited,
Right.
just in case.
Right.
And like I said, we're talking about a catch dog. That I presume that's what they're talking about, the dog that they'd use to catch a pig or a hog. And I'm just not sure that's something that you need to be
So
doing.
you got to
with
think
it.
about that. Like if that got out there to the outside, the left wingers
Sure.
or whoever,
Sure.
that wouldn't be good ammo for us to say, hunting is a good ethical sport and we cherish it and this and that. I mean, those mental pictures that I have going through my head is not something we want to.
Well, and we saw that last week with those idiots that were torturing that wounded buck. I don't know if you saw that. And they called them hunters. Those weren't hunters.
No.
Hunters would never do something like that.
No, doing stuff like that is dumb.
Hunters would never do something
And
like
prosecute, we prosecute folks that do stuff like that. And we've had successful prosecution in court. So if people think it's cool to do this and do that and treat those wild animals just like a punching bag or whatever, that's
we saw that go.
not
We
wise.
saw that go viral last week with a national story, and those were not hunters. Hunters do not do that. They would never do something like that to any living creature. A hunter would do it, and that's the key. When you take a shot at a deer, you want a clean, instant. That's the bottom line, and I do it any other way.
Right.
There's no other way to do it, and there's nothing more that bothers me to wound a deer.
Yeah.
And then I've sat there and literally worn myself out to the point I couldn't walk anymore trying to find that deer because
you afford it. I mean, you owe them that.
Sure.
That effort.
Sure. Well, I want the meat. That's why I shot it to begin with. I didn't shoot it to be shooting it.
Right.
That was the bottom line. All right, Dr. Demarais, let's talk about buck movement. Let's see. Where are we? Here we go.
Well, we're talking about the peak breeding and what I meant by peak breeding season, peak rut. I wanted to clarify on the agency's website. If you go to that, it's a 5-day interval that is peak rut, and I'm talking about a 2-week interval. So if you want to know where your hunting place is in terms of peak rut, that's going to give you a 5-day on the website. And so just center on that third day of that 5-day interval and add a week on either side of that centered day, and that's what I'm talking about with peak rut. And if somebody's down in the Hattiesburg area and their breeding season is much different than the breeding season on our study area, the same kind of behavior is going to take place in their peak rut. It's just going to be a different calendar date than the peak rut on our study area, which our study area peak rut, this 2-week period, is the last week in December and the first week in January.
Whoa. You brought up something I just thought about when you said this. Deer really only have hardened antlers from, what'd you say, about October?
Yeah, mid-September to October 1 they're pretty much all hardened antlers. They've shed their velvet and they're fully operational.
Right, and then they'll lose them usually by end of February.
End of February. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing if you think, but because that's really what they have them there is just for mating, I guess, and protecting themselves and fighting, huh?
That's exactly right. The primary reason is to be dominant over other bucks. And
wow.
That's why they get bigger with age. Is when they're younger, they're growing their bodies, and they're not investing nutrition into their antlers. Once their bodies kind of fill out, then they start putting more energy and protein into their antlers, and the antlers get proportionally larger with age.
Now, and you guys here a couple of years ago looked at whether the does choose based on antlers, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So the primary justification for bigger antlers is to fight another buck with. But we proved in an experiment in our deer research facility that female deer, when they are in estrus, actually prefer bucks with bigger antlers.
Well, what do you know? So if we were to compare that,
size does matter, as they say,
amongst
Getting
the
a
panel
risque
here
on the old Mississippi Outdoor Show today.
I was talking about antlers.
and muscles. So I would pull more does if we were all deer in here. I would pull more does than Butler would. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know how big your antlers are. Now you're pumped up a little bigger in the arms than Adam is. But we also
awesome. JT, we better cut this off.
We also looked at body size, which is you're kind of getting at, and age.
Wow.
Check.
And age and body size weren't that important. It was all about the big antlers.
Really?
The big muscle.
We can't call it.
What are home range?
It's the headgear. It's the headgear.
What are home range and movement paths, and how do they change with the breeding season?
Good segue there, JT, out of that. Movement paths are the way we document how much a deer moves during the day, and we can add up the total step length. When he's walks from somewhere at 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., he travels a certain distance, and 7 to 8 a.m. and 8 to 9, and travels through the day, a 24-hour period. We add up all those distances, and that's total step length in the day. And we like to talk about that because that kind of gives an indication of how much movement a buck is making throughout the day. Now, the daily path length that I talked about last show down here during October and November is about 1,500 yards, and that's about 3/4 of a mile. So during October and November, that adult buck is covering about 3/4 of a mile during an average day. Now, during the early rut, that first 2 weeks, when 15% of the does are being bred, he's covering 2,500 yards. He adds 1,000 yards of walking and moving to his daily activity pattern, which now we're talking about a mile and a half of walking during the early rut.
Wow.
So he's almost doubling his distance walked. Talk about a great exercise program, doubling the amount of steps you take in a day. Now, during the peak of the rut, it actually drops down a little bit, down to 2,300 yards. And think about it, early in the early rut, only 15% of the does are in estrus and ready to be bred. So the bucks are spending, but they sense that in the air almost, and they're walking looking for these very limited resources. And during the peak of the rut, when 70% of the does are going to be in estrus and available to be bred, there's a lot more local action, and so they don't have to walk as far looking for it. They find it more regularly. So they're still walking a lot more than they do in October and November, but not quite as much as they did in the early rut. So we talk about hunters hunting the peak of the rut because that's when they see the bucks the most, but the bucks are actually walking more during the early rut. But they see the bucks more during the peak of the rut because now the bucks are tending a doe, hanging around a doe, and I've seen a doe that was in estrus actually followed by 8 different bucks one time. It was hilarious. She ran across a field, and then right behind her there was a buck, and then 50 yards behind him there was another buck, and it was on for a total of 8 bucks chasing after this doe.
Well, we all know that a doe can. I mean, this has been proven that a doe can have twins by 2 different deer, right?
Absolutely. The MSU Deer Lab was the first research group in the world that proved that white-tailed deer, their twins, 25% of the time are from different fathers.
Wow. All right, I know we're going to talk about Mississippi Outdoors TV, but I just want to talk about we got one more question to go with Dr. Steve Demarais. MSUDeerLab.edu, or is it .com?
.com.
MSUDeerLab.com. You can go there and learn so much more, folks. They think about this. Pretty cool. That I want to come up there one day. Next time I'm in Starkville, well, thanks. I'm up there next week. I want to come see that place if I can one day. I'm really interested in that. As we continue with Mississippi Outdoors Radio, we'll do it next. Hang on. As we continue here, Butler, what's happening on Mississippi Outdoors TV?
The TV show is preempted again this week due to the MPB Pledge Drive. Going to be back, I think the 19th, going to be back showing some episodes.
January.
No, I think there's going to be one.
December?
19th of this month. It'll be from earlier in the season, and then after first of the year, it'll be back showing new episodes. So
let's talk about some
tuned.
stuff we can do learning from the deer study.
Well,
Yeah.
I've got one last question for Dr. Demarais. You talked last time about and explained about risk-related switching points. Maybe maybe review that and give us any updates on how adult bucks choose their habitats.
Yeah, basically where are you going to find them in the woods? And there's different types of woods, of course, and most hunters understand that. Last time we showed that during heavy hunting periods, when those days when there's a lot of hunters in the woods, they are going to actually avoid certain habitats where those hunters are hunting. So that was the switching point. You can hunt those woods where you normally see deer up to a point, but on really heavy hunted days, they switch out of there and you're not going to see them. So
best thing to do, go find another place to look for them.
Find another place, or keep your place from being overhunted. Reduce your hunting effort by a third or so, and you'll see more bucks. The other thing we learned since the analysis we've done since that last show, JT, we looked at food plot selection, or when bucks go to food plots. Mm-hmm. And, most hunters are going to hunt on a food plot.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, 9 times out of 10.
9 times out of 10, hunters are going to be on a food plot. Our bucks they're adult bucks. Our adult bucks are 4 times more likely to go into a food plot. Guess when?
At night.
At night.
Yeah.
We didn't even need to do the study, Adam. You, turkey coordinator, could have told us that. Mm-hmm. And that's what we expected the answer to be, but to have data to say 4 times more likely in the food plot at night.
So what you're telling me is if you want to get a buck, you need to be in the woods.
Absolutely. Find where they're coming from. And actually our most recent episode 6 on our Facebook page about the buck movement study, Bronson Strickland, our extension wildlife specialist, does a great job of talking about how you apply our knowledge that we've learned into improving where you hunt. Check it out, Facebook.
I think that's what a lot of the listeners will really like to see, because there's a lot of high science here, but when you break it all down, it definitely can help.
How does it relate?
A hunter.
How can I use it?
Yeah, a hunter become a better deer hunter.
Yeah.
Well, I know where I hunted. The old man that used to hunt up there with my buddy, he never would go to the food plot. He was always in the woods, and
successful was he?
Could kill bucks. He certainly could. He could kill bucks.
And the hunters that hunt food plots, even when they see a buck, it's he came out right at dark.
Too late.
Well, don't hunt where he's coming out at dark. Go into the woods. Figure out where he's coming from. Mm-hmm. Find his bedding area or wherever, and his path into the food plot, and be 100 yards or 200 yards further in. Makes
sense. Of course, a lot of people too. And that does make sense, because if you think about it, I mean, how many times have I hunted over a food plot, and usually all you see are does, or maybe an occasional spike or two, but it's usually does. and they're the ones that are out there feeding. Of course, if you're just out for meat, there's nothing better than a big old fat doe.
That's right.
There's no doubt about that. I think that's table fare. You can't beat it. But if you're hunting for antlers, I guess it's the mentality that you have, what you're out for.
And the deer learn if you shoot all your does on food plots and don't shoot bucks on food plots, you'll see just the opposite. The bucks will learn I can come out into the food plot. The does will avoid them. I've seen that.
I'm glad you brought that up, JT, because I was going to ask that. I know you didn't collar any does for this study, but I'm going to get your opinion on whether how these results translate to doe, or are they analogous with doe movement, or you think there's a difference between the sexes?
It's based on hunting pressure, and if you the doe is going to learn to avoid hunting pressure just like the bucks. Now, in terms of this behavior associated with the rut, the doe has 1 day of being in the rut. Maybe 2 days total out of her year she's in estrus, and so it's that part of it is greatly different from the buck study. But in terms of how deer respond to hunting pressure, if you harvest your does a lot on food plots and don't shoot any bucks on food plots, those does will avoid the food plots like the bucks do.
Wow. Dr. Steve Demarais, I could sit here and listen to you all day. Fascinating information. It's a pleasure to have you. Hope you have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, JT.
And Butler, we'll see you and Reed next week.
Next week.
We'll be continuing with more Mississippi Outdoors Radio, as always brought to you by the Foundation for Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. The Eagle Hour of the Gallo Rewind is on the way next, as well as Good Things with Rebecca Turner and Sports Talk Mississippi. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.